Welcome to the Radiant Visalia podcast. Join us at one of our two services, 9 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. Download the Church Center app or visit our website, radiantvisalia.com, to stay connected with us. All right, enjoy.
There is a heavenly city that I'm compelled to find.
I thought when we said we're going to pack every week and not every other week, that not as many people would want to join a pack. I thought if we made it more challenging, less people would be up for the challenge, and I was wrong. And it's just a real privilege to lead such a responsive church. And I just want to thank you guys for taking your walk with Christ very serious, and it's a real joy to lead here. It's also we're about to open the scriptures and learn from the book of James, and I don't know about you, but sometimes I can kind of grumble and complain about the Word of God. You ever been caught doing that? Sometimes in Genesis 1, I just want more. It's essentially a poem. And I'm like, I want some details here. And I want more. I want more on the personal lives of the disciples. That's a longing too. And I can live longing for more. And I just want to stop us in the midst of maybe our complaint concerning the scriptures and say that we have a book from the brother of Jesus that dates in the 40s. Not 1540, not 740, not even 140 AD. The 40s. The 40s. A book from the brother of Jesus. It's just a huge privilege to have and to hold and to get to teach from and be inspired by Scripture. And I feel like, repenting for my attitude. If you have a Bible, could you open it to James? It's almost at the end, and it's small, so you can blow right past it. We'll be here for 12 weeks, right up until Christmas. James 1, starting in verse 1. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, greetings. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation, because like a flower of the grass he will pass away. For the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the grass. Its flower falls and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. James is very bold. He is very direct. Anybody had a bold little brother? like a little brother who says stuff that gets you in trouble. It's like a little brother's job to be mouthy. James is very bold and very direct in what he says, and he knows he says what he says in the shadow of his older brother, Jesus. So he's pretty strong, pretty direct. He jumps right in here. I don't know if you noticed this, but there's no customary greeting. There's no typical thanksgiving at the beginning of this letter. There's no, I hope you guys are doing well. There's no, I hope the weather's cooling down in Visalia. There's no small talk. There's no, the Dodgers are doing that thing again, freaking us out. There's just no small talk. He cuts the crap and he goes straight for it. And he says, count it all joy when you face trials. No, how's it going? Are you facing trials? He just jumps right in. He's really direct. He says, count it all joy when you face trials of various kinds. For you know that this testing has a purpose. I mean, just think about it. Like, let's pretend you're hearing this for the first time. I know you've probably read this passage before or heard something crazy like this in church before. This is a crazy thing to say. This is an irrational thing to say. And you find yourself as you read it going, okay, James, what's the rationale for this irrational call to count it all joy when you face trials, when you face testing? And James doesn't say, I've got a secret. You should count it all joy because I know something you don't. You should count it all joy because an angel came and spoke to me something that you've never heard, and I'm about to unpack it for you. That's not what he says. He says, count it all joy because you know how this works. Isn't that amazing? Count it all joy, you know. And I found myself reading it this week going, I don't know. I don't know what the rationale would be for counting it all joy when you face trials of various kinds. Oh no, you know, says James. And I want to spend the rest of our service reminding you of things that you know. You know these things. This is not some secret. You know how life works. You know how life goes. And so can I remind you of 10 things that you know? Because here's the truth. As I read these things, I was like, I do know that, but I don't like it. I do know that life works that way, and I hate it. I do know that, and I don't want it. I don't want it that way. And I think there's more than a few things here that we actually know. And James would say, you know this stuff. This is not some secret that I've discovered. This is common knowledge amongst believers. You know how testing works. You don't want it. You don't like it. You maybe wish it was another way. But we know how this stuff goes down. So here are 10 things that you know that James wants to remind us of. And we need to be reminded, especially when we're in pain. We need to be reminded when we're confused by the things that we're facing. It's profound at times to be reminded of the things that we say we believe, but then when we're caught in some chaos, we lose sight of. So here's the 10 things. The first thing that James reminds us of, that I believe that we know deep down, is that you've got to serve somebody. You've got to serve somebody. We know this is true because Bob Dylan said this. I mean, the Bible said it, and then Bob Dylan confirmed it, so I don't get any emails from anybody. The Bible said it, Bob Dylan confirmed it, said it something like, you got to serve somebody, whatever. We've heard it. We know it. It's amazing. James says, I'm a servant of God, the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm a slave, is how he introduces himself. What's incredible is what's not said here, because it could have pulled rank. Maybe you've heard of me. I'm the one who grew up with Jesus. Therefore, I have power and position, and you should listen to me. You may know me. I pastor a small church in Jerusalem, responsible for the spread of the gospel. You may know me. I interrupted a huge debate about Jew and Gentile, and my words were the deciding words. That's not what he says. I'm James, a servant, a slave. Everyone will serve someone or something. Everyone will put someone or something at the center, and they'll organize their lives around it. It's not just religious people or people who go to church that center their life on something. Everyone will serve someone or something. You're a worshiper. Did you know that? No. The people in the first 4 rows are worshipers, and I am a spectator. No. You are a committed, devoted, very consistent worshiper. You're as good at worship as Monica is. You're as into worship as Jared is. You might not be as into Jesus as Jared is, but you're as into worship as Jared is. Worship is ascribing worth. It's ascribing value, and we all do it all the time. We do it with our thoughts, we do it with our time, we do it with our money, we do it with our energy. We're constantly voting, ascribing worth to what we meditate on. You're constantly worshiping. You're just as devoted to it as Monica is. No way. I didn't even sing, Trav. I know. You're that devoted to yourself and how you feel that you won't come outside of that. You will organize your life around your comfort, and everything that calls you outside of your comfort, you'll deny. You're doing it. We're all doing it. You can do it, I promise. We're doing it all the time. You have to serve somebody. And James is saying here, late in my life, after ignoring and mocking my brother for years, I chose to organize my life around him. I chose to put him at the center and serve him, become a slave to him. What is the weightiest thing in your life? What's the thing at the center? Could be yourself, could be a spouse, could be a position, could be a person, could be a career, could be a past. But that thing is the weightiest thing in your life, and now you make sacrifices to keep it there at the center. What is it? What is it for you? Because you're doing it right now, I promise. You're an amazing, you were designed to worship. God wired you for this. What is it for you? What are you serving? The second thing you know that James reminds us of is you have to do something pretty special to get your half-brother to worship you as God. We know this. This makes sense to us. Whether you're a Christian or not, you would know this. Your brother would have to do something pretty amazing for you to worship him as God. What would he have to do? Think about it for a second. What would your brother have to do for you to worship him as God and say, I'm a slave to him? What would he have to do? Now think about this. What would your half-brother have to do for you to worship him as God and for you to say, I'm a slave to him? If you're sitting here and you're thinking, hey, this would be nice, this would resolve a lot of family drama if my brother were to worship me, if my sibling were to worship me as God, here's the recipe. Here's how you get your brother or your sister to worship you as God. First, this is what you got to do. First, you die a very public death. In fact, you invite many people to see you hang naked and be tortured and executed. It's so graphic that your beard is pulled from your face. And it happens in front of a huge crowd. And then you come up. You're dead for 3 days, and you crawl out of 75 pounds of fragrance and grave clothes, and you make it out of a sealed, guarded tomb. And then you present yourself to your family and friends, and you eat a fish sandwich with them. This is what Jesus did. And if you can do this, your sibling will worship you too. Your half-brother will be a slave to you if you can do this. You'll get more than your own room if you can predict and pull off your own resurrection. That's what happened. That's what changed for James. The third thing that you know, James would say this to you. You don't need a sermon to remind you of this, but life is brutal. Life is really tough. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you face trials of various kinds. Not if you face trials of various kinds, but when you face trials of various kinds. And the Bible is really honest. One of the reasons that I believe it is because it's really gritty. And it's not a fairy tale. Really gritty book. Various trials, I kind of got a kick out of this. You could either like laugh or cry, I guess. But various trials, this is like multicolored. It's as if James is saying like, count it all joy when you taste the rainbow. I know we can read stuff like this and go, does my trial, does it count? Does it make it into what James is talking about? He's saying like, all the colors of the rainbow are represented here, and whatever you're facing, it fits under various trials. James is drawing our attention to the fact that God's at work, not just in the good times, but God's at work in the tough times. God's at work in the bad times. Now, no doubt God's at work in the good times. I'm not saying He's not. I'm not saying He's only at work in the bad times. But I'm saying He's not only at work in the good times, which is something we can tend to believe. He's at work. He's doing something in the bad times. And James wants us to remind us of that. You know that. You've heard that. You believe that. But sometimes when we're facing difficulty, we can forget that. But God is at work in the tough times, not just in the good times. We are, James would remind us, God's scattered people, not God's sheltered people. Jesus would say that we will face trouble. We will face trials. This passage from Peter is amazing. Peter, who was a disciple and died a martyr's death, he says, "Beloved, don't be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you." Don't be surprised as though something strange were happening to you. I don't know how many times I've read this. And when I face trouble, when I face trial, I'm always surprised. What? Because I've got a deal worked out with God, right? Which is that I do this and you do that. I live wholeheartedly. I follow Jesus. I'm obedient to Him, and then my life works out. And I always feel surprised when I face trials, a fiery trial. It's really important that we have a good theology of suffering as a church. It's really important that we have a good theology of suffering. That we've thought about suffering before we enter it, because things get pretty confusing when we do. That almost like we have a game plan. Almost like we've decided in advance. This is what we're going to do. It's really important because usually you go down because of a combination of things. You know how boxing works? Fighters don't usually fall because of one punch. They fall because of a combination. And there's one punch that sets up another punch. There is a combo that usually causes you to fall. And I've noticed that for us, there's a combo. It's not usually the suffering that we walk through, but the suffering that we walk through causes us to question God's goodness and if we can really trust Him. And that's the punch that takes us down. The jab is something that's not going to knock us down. But the jab that we face in trials is something that sets up the left hand, and that is the thing that takes us down, which is that we begin to question who God is and if he can be trusted. We start to question who people are and if they can be trusted. Then we can begin to isolate in our pain. And this is the combination that sets us up and destroys us at times. So it's really important that we can face the jabs that come our way and not question God's character or his goodness to us, because that's the kiss of death. We can face trials, and we will face trials. And we need to decide in advance, right, that we're not going to determine God's character based on our circumstances, but we're going to see our circumstances in light of God's character. You need to decide that in advance because it's going to get really confusing. If your worldview, and we would never say this is embarrassing. We make fun of Joel Osteen because he believes this. We would never say this, but some of this resides in us. If your worldview is that if you love Jesus wholeheartedly and follow him, then your life is going to go well, then when your life doesn't go well, it's not just the pain of the difficulty that you need to process, but you begin to question whether or not you can really trust God because, again, you had a deal with him. And when you don't receive the life that you really wanted, then you don't just feel the pain of tragedy, but you also question whether or not you can trust God. This is the combination that causes people to fall. It's really important that we've thought through this idea of suffering before we enter it. The fourth thing that you know this. You may not want it, you may not like it, but I think James would say, come on, guys. You know this. This is no secret. Is that everything must be tested in order to be substantiated. Everything must be tested. Why would your faith be excluded from this reality? Everything must be tested. If it's not tested, then it can't be trusted. If it's not tested, if your beliefs are not tested, they'll never become strong convictions. Every belief has to be tested. It has to be proven in order for it to be trusted. And this is true not just in the area of faith, it's true across the board. Here's a couple things about tests, just to help you as you go into them, because you will go into tests, so that you're not surprised when you enter a fiery trial. 3 things. Tests reveal. And sometimes we don't like the results. Man, sometimes it's discouraging. You ever been in the midst of a test and you're like, I'm flunking. I don't even need to finish this test. I got an F already and I'm halfway through. I give up. I'm not even going to bubble these answers anymore. I have failed. And it's really discouraging at times that tests reveal, but there is a point to them. The other thing that's really difficult about tests, and please get your head around this, is that the teacher's usually silent when tests are given. And this is the most testing thing, is that you want to raise your hand and say, what was that answer again? And there is silence. And this, again, is probably the most testing thing that you'll face, but don't be surprised by it. The teacher is usually silent when giving a test. That's the worst part of the test. The good news is this, that we don't test what we don't value. You don't test scrap metal. You throw scrap metal on the pile. You don't test what you don't intend to use. And the promise here is that this test is working for us and not against us. That even if it reveals weakness, that it's working for us. Peter, the great apostle, is walking with Jesus, and Jesus says, Pete, yes, Jesus. Hey, I just want to let you know, I've handed you over to Satan to be sifted. Oh, okay. Well, that's good to let me know. Thanks, Jesus. Yeah. Don't worry about it. I prayed for you, and I prayed for you, not that you wouldn't fail, Pete, but that your faith wouldn't fail. You're going to fail. Tests will reveal some less than flattering things about where our hearts are at. Am I alone? I mean, is it just straight discouraging to see what comes to the surface when you're tested, when there's pressure, when you're squeezed? It's troubling. We rejoice. The test is not a joyful experience. The cancer, this verse isn't saying like when you get cancer, rejoice in the cancer. That's not what we're rejoicing in. We're not rejoicing in the trial. We're rejoicing that these trials are producing something. We believe that there's some sort of purpose to this test, that there's a destination, that we're on the road to maturity, to being perfect, lacking nothing, that there's a point to this pain. Hebrews 12 says, for the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. It's not going to feel joyful to go through a test, but we rejoice knowing that these tests serve a purpose. Later, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Everything must be tested in order to be substantiated. You're here, and this morning, like you're single, and you've like met the one, like out at the coffee cart. They said you could have their coffee so that you could get in here for worship. And you've met the one. They're the one. You know it. You're going to spend the rest of your lives together. You know that based on the conversation that you had. He or she completes you, and there's an exciting belief that maybe something's going to happen. Well, that belief is about to be tested in order to be substantiated. It's going to be tested because you're going to take her on a date, and the whole time she chews, her jaw is going to click. And you're going to think, man, this is bugging me. Why does she chew that way? It's about to be tested because of her taste in music. It's about to be tested because you're going to meet her parents. It's about to be tested because she's going to find out about your addiction to video games. It's about to be tested because she's going to meet the friends you have because of your addiction to video games. It's about to be tested because she's going to see your room at your parents' house. And that belief might make it. It might make it, and it might be substantiated. And then you might have a strong conviction, this person's the one for me. They got a clicky jaw, they play video games, these things annoy me, but doggone it, my belief has become a strong conviction that this person is the one. Or it may very well reveal that this person is not the one. Don't you understand that if it's not been tested, it can't be trusted? That it's just a feeling. It's just a belief. And that belief must come under the scrutiny of endurance. When tested, doubts and fears are going to arise. No doubt. No doubt. When you're tested, doubts and fears will arise. Doubts are a natural part of progress in relationship. And I want you to think of Christianity in that way, because when you see the Christian faith as a set of propositions, or even a worldview, or a philosophy, or a religion, then when we doubt, we think we're doubting it. We think we're doubting something. But if you see Christianity as a relationship with the God of the universe, then you're not just doubting something, you're doubting someone. And it's a little bit different. You're doubting someone based on what you do or don't know about them. And so just continue down this road of Christianity, not as, a set of propositions, but as a relationship. And in any relationship, you face doubts. As that relationship grows, doubts will become opportunity for that growth. You've done this before. You meet that person and you're thinking, man, I wonder if they like me as much as I like them. And you have a choice to make then and there. You can continue to risk in relationship, or you can be held captive by that doubt. Never make yourself known. You can come to the point where you're like, man, I wonder if they're going to like me after they meet my parents. And you can be captive to that and never introduce them to your parents. Or you can risk in relationship and be like, it's my crazy mom, And you risk. That's a natural part of growth in relationship. Anybody ever come to the fork in the road where you're like, I don't know if I can fart in front of them. I don't know if our relationship can handle this. I don't know if they'll send me away. I don't know if they'll receive me. And you have a choice to make. You either hesitate and hold it in because you don't think the relationship can bear it, or you risk it. And you go, I don't know if it can bear it, but I can't bear holding it in any longer. I'm going to feel sick. It's true. It's only funny because it's true. When you face doubts, here's the deal, and you will face doubts. I really, as much as this passage seems harsh, doubts as we grow in a relationship are here to stay. You can either hold back and become a prisoner to the doubts, or you can risk and say, I'm going to give it a go and see if my doubts and anxieties are resolved. That's your choice. Francis Bacon, a 17th century philosopher, said, if a man begin with certainties, he will end in doubts. But if he is content to begin with doubts, he will end in certainties. Some people think that this walk of faith, that in order to become a Christian is that you have all your doubts answered, and then you go ahead and say, all right, I'm going to do it. No, the truth is that you're compelled by the gospel. You're attracted to Jesus. There's something that you sense, and you still have doubts, and you begin the journey with those doubts, and you face those things. So what kind of doubts are being condemned here? This scripture is kind of harsh, right? It's like, hey, if you're struggling, go ahead and ask. But if you're struggling too bad, don't expect to receive anything, okay? Because you're double-minded. Try again, right? Hey, if you're struggling because you lack wisdom, come on and ask me. But if you really lack wisdom, don't ask me because I won't give it. What kind of doubts are being condemned here? The problem is not an intellectual doubt or a thought, but being in two minds about something. This is a phrase that James most likely coined, double-minded. It's his. He owns the copyright on this term. And it actually means two-souled. That you're facing both ways. This isn't an issue of a thought or an intellectual doubt. This is about allegiance. This is about your spirit being committed, and you are torn in your allegiance. Doubt as a state of mind is what this is talking about. There's a huge difference between having a doubt or doubt having you. And you know the difference. I don't know how to describe it, but I think James would be like, you know. You know. You know what it's like to have faith as a state of mind and see doubt as an intruder. And you know what it's like to have doubt as a state of mind and to feel like faith is an intruder. And you have to keep treating doubt like an intruder. If you're ever so into doubt that you've just embraced it as a state of mind, I'm just cynical, this is how I am. Don't expect growth. Don't expect growth. Let me show you an example of doubt without double-mindedness. This is a beautiful passage. This man brings his boy to Jesus who's demon-possessed in Mark 9. Again, doubt without double-mindedness. A man who's doubting but is not facing both ways. Mark 9, they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy. And he fell on the ground and he rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. And it's often cast him into fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus said, if you can. If I can. All things are possible for one who believes. Immediately the father of the child cried out, and he said, I believe, help my unbelief. I believe, help my unbelief. Which way is this guy facing? Is this guy two-souled in his doubt? No, this is doubt without double-mindedness. I believe, help my unbelief. I'm facing you. I'm looking to you. I'm saying if you can do anything, God, do something. This is not a man facing in two directions. The sixth thing that you know that James would remind you of is that when you're in trials, you need to pray for wisdom so that you don't do something dumb. When you're in trials, you need to pray for wisdom so that you don't do something dumb. When we're in pain, pain feels like the worst thing in the world. Am I right? It's not. What you do with your pain is the worst thing in the world, or I should say can be the worst thing in the world. How you cope or how you choose to check out when you're in pain is, I think, the worst thing in the world. The pain can produce something beautiful, but how you check out, how you cope, what you do with how you feel, where you go when you're in pain, where you medicate, that is what becomes the problem. When you're in pain and you're under pressure, we want it to have its full effect. We're promised that this steadfastness, which means to remain under, that if you remain under this weight, it's going to produce results. But we tend to, in our pain, cheat. Am I right? Well, they did this, so I'm going to do this. Well, God didn't do this, so how would He expect me to live like this? When we're in pain, we cheat. I used to think that mirrors at the gym were there so that people could flex their muscles and maybe be flattered by the way they look. That seems to be what I see is the guy like sneaking a glance, you know? Like, not like overtly flexing in the mirror, but just kind of checking yourself out, you know? And I just think, why do they put these stupid mirrors in the gym? And then I realized that it's probably, you can help me, someone may know the answer to this, but it's actually probably more so that you can see your form. Because I find when I'm under a weight, I cheat. Right about the time an exercise is starting to burn, that's when I find a new way to do that exercise so that it doesn't burn, right? And you think you're doing curls, but then you see yourself in the mirror and you're just trying to lay it over on your chest, you know? The second it starts to burn here is the second I find a new way to do it. And when we're in pain, when something's beginning to burn, we choose to cheat. We find a new way to do it. When I'm doing push-ups, the first few are really great, and then you can watch my butt just come up in the air, and my chest no longer touches the ground. My form goes to pot because it's starting to hurt. And we need to, when we're in pain, pray for wisdom. That's amazing. James doesn't say, hey, pray for deliverance. I mean, you get so screwed up when you're in pain. Anybody ever counted like this? I mean, he's saying count it all, right? And I find myself when I'm doing push-ups like 1, 2, 5, 8, 12, and 15. You know, it's like you can't even count. You can't even recall what's actually going on. You're going to find some way to cheat. So pray for wisdom. God-given discernment as to how God's world works. Pray for that. Don't pray for deliverance. Don't pray for strength. Pray for wisdom because you need perspective when you're suffering. I mean, it's all bearing in on you. You need perspective. We moved this week, which was a painful process that I wanted to worm out of. And Tiff was like, I want you to roll these things up and take them. So thanks to Zan Starbuck, my wife has like 6 or 8 weavings in our house. Anyone else have these like weavings, these macrame things that were cool back in the 70s, now making their way onto the wall? Is everyone all right? We doing all right? So she's got these weavings, right? And I am the guy who loves to be in charge of purging, namely because I'm lazy and I don't want to move that, and I have no problem throwing it out. So she says, roll up my weavings. Well, one of them I'm rolling up and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I will not take this. Why are we even taking this? I mean, this one's bad. I pulled it up, I stared at it, I'm like, I'm not taking this weaving, you know, look at it. It looks like Avery did it. Like, we're not going to hang this on our wall. And I'm just like, I'm going to straight throw this away. She won't even notice it's gone. Just mouthing off about this weaving and about my job. And then I turned it around. and I was staring at the backside where it's all knotted and you can't, and I was like, oh, that's why she kept it. That actually looks kind of cool, and I would hang that on the wall. Look, this whole life, we're promised you're staring at the backside of a weaving. This whole life, you're promised that you're staring at the backside of a weaving. And you should pray for wisdom because you need the perspective involved in flipping it around. And you should ask. Wisdom will manifest itself in asking, not deciding. If I would have come to Tiffany, can you imagine with that weaving and being like, this one looks like hell, and we're not putting it on the wall. No way. You know, and she's like, hey, you might want to flip it around. You know, and I'm like, what? Dang it. You know? You should ask. You should ask the Creator what's going on. You should ask for wisdom because you need perspective. The seventh thing that you know is that faith, it can't be like a wave. Faith can't be like a wave or else you're going to get tossed. Faith is supposed to anchor you in the storm, right? And James says here that the person who doubts is like a wave. You're like a wave. And faith needs to be something more than that, right? Waves are the product of circumstances. Waves are the byproduct of wind. Circumstances determine and create waves. As the ocean floor gets shallower, we get them, but it's the wind that stirs them up. They're the result of external forces. And you can't have a faith that's based on circumstances. Your faith has to be rooted in the character of God. And that's why James says, ask this God who's generous. He's generous. He's wholehearted in his generosity. He gives generously without reproach. You can't exhaust his welcome. This is our faith is an anchor in these times. Your faith can't be like a wave, right? It can't be like, well, he loves me not. This happened, this didn't. You can't have a faith based on circumstances or else you're going to get tossed. It has to be rooted in the character of God. Get it through your heads that we will see our circumstances in light of or through the character of God. Not see the character of God through our circumstances. Number 8, James knows that you know this. Instagram is depressing. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation and the rich in his humiliation, because like a flower of the grass he'll pass away. For the sun rises with its scorching heat, withers the grass, its flower falls, and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. What the heck is James saying? The tendency when we're in suffering is to start comparing. What? Him? Why? Me? Look at this guy. You kidding me? His business flourishes as mine fades. God, he does dirty business. You know it. That man's a liar. Are you kidding me? This is the tendency. And James is saying to us, there's no win in comparison. Don't do that. And trust that everything's going to level out in the end. Instagram incites depression. We know that. Scientifically, it's like you can't get enough of it. You keep, you judge the guy who smokes cigarettes because it's like, doesn't that guy know that causes lung cancer? Instagram incites depression. You give a smartphone to an 8th grader and connect them to social media, they're 27% more likely to experience depression. Because when we're suffering, we need to be reminded of other saints who also suffered and endured. And instead, when we're suffering, we're reminded of all the people that are having the best day of their life. When your kids are out of whack, you're reminded of all the people whose kids are in whack. Don't compare when you're in suffering. Trust. Look, the gospel, sometimes is going to take the low and exalt them into high places. Sometimes the gospel comes and takes those who are in high places and brings them low. You've experienced both those things if you've walked with Jesus. Sometimes he takes you in your lowly state and he exalts you. Sometimes you're in a proud state. I'm in need of nothing state. And the gospel comes and makes you low. Trust that this is all going to level out in the end. What James is saying, look, you don't want anyone's life but your own. You don't want anyone's life with your own, so stop comparing when you're suffering. The ninth thing that you know that I think we just don't want and we wish it was some other way is that why is a question that will never go away until we see the other side of the weaving. Why will most likely be a question that never goes away. There'll be life had even when God doesn't answer the why. Job is referenced in the back of this book as a model of the power of patience. And Job spends, 30-something chapters questioning God. Like, why? Why would these things be taken from me? I did nothing to deserve the way I'm being dealt with. And what's fascinating is that when God finally shows up, God doesn't answer his questions. God gives Job a question. Where were you? Where were you? And somehow, life is restored to Job, even though his question is never answered. It's kind of weird how that can work, huh? Like that you've been before God with a burning question, and without it being answered, you can still experience life, or that God can answer your question with a question, and somehow you're content with that. It's amazing. Again, I think it's so much just about the teacher no longer being silent during the test. It brings great peace. Some of our doubts, I think, are the result of unrealistic expectations concerning certainty in this life. That we're asking this life to do something it was never meant to do. The 10th thing that you know this, and James would say it, like you know how this works, is that there is a cross before the crown. There's a cross before the crown. You don't even know Jesus and you know this. You don't have a Bible and you know this. Before you get crowned with a Dallas Cowboys helmet, before you get crowned with a place of position, there is a cross that you bear to get to that place. No doubt. People, the guys playing football today have endured through really trying times. No doubt they've persisted. No doubt they've made huge sacrifices. There is a cross for everyone who will wear a crown. And that's why the comparison of looking at people and wearing them and going, I wish I had that guy's life. You don't know that guy's life. You know the position they've ended up with. You have no idea what they've sacrificed to get there. You have no idea the road that they've walked. So stop comparing yourself. You don't want anyone's life but your own. There is and will be a cross before the crown. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast, remains under the pressure, who doesn't weasel out or cop out under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. There's a promise here, the promise of maturity, the promise of being complete, the promise of lacking nothing, that when you're going through testing, you can stand on that. Lord, I don't know why this is happening, but I do know that you're producing something in me through it. Worship team, would you guys come? Is it Jared? What a team. Man, for those of you being tested, for those of you in trial, which I would guess is many of us, and we can laugh, we can talk about weavings and cheesy, dumb stuff and farts, and we can all snicker. Some of you are under an incredible load right now, like incredible pressure. I know people in here who've lost parents. I know people in here who've lost kids. There's real stuff going on for people right now. and Christ's death gives us insight into our own suffering, we continue as Christians to look to the cross to try to make sense of this life. What's really interesting about Christ's suffering and kind of the insights that we gain from it, isn't it amazing that Christ wasn't given a shortcut? There was no silver spoon for him. Scripture says that he learned obedience through the things that he suffered. If there was no shortcuts for him, I'm guessing, I don't know, there might not be any shortcuts for us. That we may have to suffer as well. Here's the amazing part of this, is that we can count it all joy because the joy set before him, he endured the cross, took our punishment, took what we deserve, offered us life, offered us his presence during trying and testing times. And now we understand. This is amazing. We can look to Christ, we can look to the cross, which had to feel for everyone gathered around Jesus like pointless suffering. An innocent man being tortured and dying a criminal's death. This is pointless pain. That's how everyone was relating to the cross. And now we look back on the cross, and it is the point of human history. Time is divided as BC and AD. There is a point to what seemed pointless. And even when God was silent, he was working. And even when God seemed defeated, somehow he came out victorious. And now we trust. Now we look back based on the resurrection. And we know that he carried our infirmities. We know that he bore our pain. We know that God was at work in what must have felt like a pointless situation. So we're going to come to the table. If you believe in Jesus, if you have embraced his cross, his death is your death, his resurrection is what you're hoping for, we're going to come to the table. There's also people available to pray with you. We want to stand with you. We can come to church like, oh, it's good. God's doing a good work, brother. You know, and it's like you say all that stuff, but deep down, you're losing hope. You're losing faith. You're losing strength. You're questioning the goodness of God, and you need someone to stand beside you and contend. Remind you of the things you know. You know how testing works. You know how steadfastness works. You know how endurance works. I wish so badly we could just preach a sermon on endurance, and that was it, and be like, we did it. We endured Trav's sermon. I wish so badly you could read a book on endurance and just learn about it. There's no way but to do this, and you can't do this without people. So, prayer team, would you guys come as well and make yourself available? I'm asking, would you stand with me? Jared's going to lead song as you come forward, and as you come forward, if you want prayer, be bold. Don't suffer alone. Don't suffer in silence. Don't try to be tough. Don't say, well, my kid didn't die. It's not that big of a deal. Don't do that, man. Just share where you're at and receive prayer this morning. Lord, you said that these things would remain: faith, hope, and love. And I just want to ask right now that you would inspire hope here, that you would raise the level of faith, that you would give faith, as we've heard from your word, that you'd give the gift of faith, that people would see the same old trial with new lenses going out of here. We just admit, Lord, that our love has grown cold. We're starting to guard our hearts. We're starting to defend ourselves. We're hurt. We have some sense that we're hurting others. And just want to ask that you would pour out your love. You'd fill our tanks this morning as we remember what you've done. Just pray with one another. Thank you for being faithful to the end. Thank you for being someone we can anchor ourselves in. In Jesus' name, amen. Sing, receive, pray, respond.
Thanks for listening. We want to be a resource for you as you walk with Jesus. So please connect with us at radiantvisalia.com. Until next time.
There is a heavenly city that I'm compelled to find. Oh, I love the flowers and trees and the smell of the grinding sea and all the beautiful things here in life. And I